Good evening and welcome to episode number 15 of the Eve Prosper Market Show. I'm your host Lockefox, and I'm here to talk about the market, the news, the general Eve economy over the last week. We'll start as we start always with show news. First, as I've said on the last couple of shows, come join me on the Tweetfleet Slack server. It's a chat service. It's kind of like Jabber, but it works better. I'm not in the game often enough to really justify starting a chat channel in-game because I wouldn't be able to interact with you guys. But if you come join the Slack server and join the channel Prosper, we can chat market and industry stuff or tool stuff, whatever floats your boat. And the second piece of show news is to remember that it's CSM season, so go check out Jita Park on the forums and Cap Stable's interviews and go engage with the candidates and go start figuring out what candidates represent your platforms. I'm on a panel show with the Cap Stable guys every week until the election where we go through the interviews of that week and do a bit of meta-analysis. So that's me and Noisy Gamer and Mark Scaris and Randa McNally. We're all talking about the candidates along with the Cap Stable hosts who do the interviews, and those guys are working their butts off so that you guys can know about the candidates. Without further ado, let's go get into the news. First, as news, the hydrostatic lore panel came out on Wednesday, and that thing is amazing. If you guys have any interest at all in Eve lore, the guys we had on that show were amazing professionals. It was really a treat, and even I learned a lot, and I thought I actually knew what the heck I was talking about. And also I would have to give a huge shout out to Matterall over at EveNews24, who has been hosting a market brief of this show, which is about a 3-minute blurb on their podcast. He did a great write-up for the hydrostatic lore panel, and he did this piece of art for the show, so for EveNews24 that he was gracious enough to let us use. So go send him love. I'm really glad he was able to help. Moving on, I know that last week we talked about CCP Quant releasing the mining data on request, which was really great. I'm still working through the data because I haven't had a ton of time to invest in it yet. But my buddy Nujiniko on Twitter and in Slack has been posting up his historical mining indexes, which are just really great. I love seeing his work. I expect to have a blog out sometime early next week about it. So, it's a really interesting data set. All of the data's out on Reddit. Look for CCP_Quant, and you can get your hands on the data too if you are as nerdy as I am. Should have some pretty interesting stuff to show. I got some help from Kriba to get login statistics, so we should have a pretty cool piece to show off in the next week or so. Also, I don't have a picture for this, but CCP has been releasing or will release some new training videos, which are actually really well done. I'm really impressed. The dev they get up on camera is one of the more comfortable in front of the camera devs we've seen in a while. Not to speak ill of CCP, but some of the devs get a little jittery on the camera. So it's really great to see someone who is a little more comfortable with it to present us to the new players. It's kind of cool. Though still love Fozzie and still think he does a good job. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and head into Plex. And Plex took a little bit lower dive than I was expecting. As I said last week, there was a Plex sale of about 10% off announced last week. But so prices dropped a little bit below 800. As long as the Plex are cheap, I expect to stay at a price of about 800. Once the sale is over, I expect us to get to settle back into about an 820 level. I know that I had been saying for months that I expected from January 1st that we'd see a rise up and we'd be back on track for billion-esque plex by FanFest, but I guess I'm going to have to change my tune. It looks like we're going to be in a 800 to 850 realm until at least FanFest, and I think that the story we're going to see here is that Nullsec is, I think, sitting on their hands, waiting for a signal about where Sov is going. Nobody wants to engage in a big campaign to really drive content until they know what is at stake. We saw something similar before Odyssey, where once the material shakeout had been teased, we saw basically a freezing out in Null where only day-to-day operations really happened. And as soon as Odyssey hit and then the new resources were rebalanced, we saw Goonswarm pounce on tests because they knew what they were going to be getting. It wasn't a surprise. And I sort of expect the general market to be in this flat doldrums until FanFest. So if we keep seeing really flat trends, I might have to change the format of the show until we start seeing more action, because I feel bad taking up 10 minutes of the show saying, same as last week, same as last week, same as last week. So just to wet your guys' whistle to talk about what's going on. Moving on, minerals. We continue to see weakness in low ends, which is a little bit weird. I had been expecting tritanium and pyrite to stay locked in at the levels that they had been at since the IS Boxer reset. So for trit here is about 6.2, but with the lowered demand, the lower content rate that we're seeing, high-sec miners are overproducing for general demand. Until we see a big campaign start to grind up, we're not going to see anywhere for those minerals to go. So, if you're the speculating type, as we head down under 6.0, this would be a good chance to start thinking about putting in long-term bets. I expect 6.0 and 6.2 to be about the steady state once the gears of war start to grind, but I don't know when that will be. So if you can get stuff at under 5.8 or 5.5, then or if it falls all the way down to 5.6, I would advocate buying up and holding, but you may be stuck with it for 3 to 6 months. So just keep that in mind. Oh, and I don't have pyrite on the thing. So, in the mid-range, Mexilon has been showing some variability. It's been relatively stable, but is now starting to saturate. And again, I think this is a signal of high sec grinding out more ore than anyone has to consume. And I think the trend will continue. I wouldn't speculate on Mexilon per se, because we'd have a long way to fall before I would consider it a good place to buy. But if you are in the business of building things, Mexilon's getting cheaper. Isogen, again in the middle, had shown some upward momentum last week, and that bubble has popped, but then we're seeing a new spike coming out. We're going to have to take a wait-and-see approach here. I still think that 125 is about a steady-state level, but we're sort of trending up towards 127, and we might see a trend line over the next week or so towards 130. Isogen could go either way, depending on how much people are using gravimetric mining sites. Noxium continues to be strong. Here in the middle band, we're seeing some upward pressure, and think that has to do with it's not as easy to supply from HiSec. I kind of do expect it to be coming down because I expect NullSec to be mining more, but we're not seeing that yet. So Noxium continues to be on the rise. Zydrene in the high end continues to fall. We're at sub IS Boxer announcement levels. I have a hard time believing we'll go much further south from 400, but I also don't believe we're going to go up any higher than 420. And then Megasite is on the same line it was on last week. I still expect it to keep its course, heading towards 725 or 700 over the next few weeks. And Morphite has stayed pretty stable over the last couple of weeks. We're seeing a little bit higher demand, which is good to see. But again, without some outlet to burn all of that industrial product on, we're going to continue to see weakness in material markets. On the fuel front, it's going to be again the same story as last week. We see slight deflation in a very slight downward pressure in nitrogen isotopes. We're just under 820. I still think that a healthy price is anything above 800 for this. So I expect the efficiency mined should remain strong in the upcoming weeks. So I don't expect nitrogen to move very much. But we are seeing upward pressure on fuel blocks, and this is again, just as last week, due to strength in the P2 PI markets. And we'll get to that in a bit. And again, we're seeing the same behavior as we see on fuel blocks week over week, is a strong weekend, a weak weekday, strong weekend. And we're going to track most of the P2 products at this point. Oxygen isotopes have been recovering very slightly, but they're still sub 750. I think we're going to see 750 as a stable state, but we could also see a little bit of movement either direction. I don't expect it to fall significantly, though, so we'll see where this one goes in the upcoming weeks. I think that as long as it's over 700, it's still a win for miners, so it should still be mined. Galente fuel blocks have been showing some hotter spikes in the last couple of days, but that should be coming down into the weekend. Helium isotopes continue to fall. They are almost at 600. We saw them dip last week to touch the 600 mark, and they've remained flat-ish. Again, I can see why people still mine it at 600, but sub 600 would start to worry me. I don't know why people would continue to mine at that level. And Amar fuel blocks, same story as previous weeks. Hydrogen isotopes are also cruising down again towards 600. I still find it weird that helium and hydrogen remain as deeply lower than oxygen and nitrogen. I would expect that miners would transition to better fuel, better isotopes, and let the prices recover, but maybe it's not as easy to get high-sec ice in Galente and Caldari space, so it might be more effort to mine it, and this is a more steady income. We'll see. If we go below 600 on either, I'm going to start wondering if people are taking crazy pills. And we continue to see spikes and troughs. Nothing new to report here. Moving on to outliers. We're going to start on the material markets. I reported last week that there was a lot of heat in the R32 and R64 moon markets. And I know this can be a little bit harder to work out the actual value of things. I know that POS reactions isn't really newbie friendly. But I expected those to wash out into the final products, and I think we're starting to see that. We saw a very hot spike in hypersynaptic fibers due to a very large buyout. Probably someone speculating on that same signal. I expect it to come back down to about 8,500 over the weekend. I expect it to level out at 8,500. We'll see if it continues going up. I continue to not see the signals wash out the way I expect. Here on nanotransistors, we see a hot spike again on that idea that we'll see things turn around and wash out, but then this return back to the original steady state. And I mean, if it becomes a losing proposition for moon reactors, they're going to change products. On the highest end, which is even weirder, is that metamaterials have taken a huge dive in the last couple of weeks, and they haven't recovered, with things like dysprosium staying as high as it has, and R32s and other R64s that go into these metamaterials staying strong, that it's hard to understand where this downward pressure is coming from. We see it again in terahertz metamaterials. If we look at the actual base moon goo, if the price of fuel is staying standard, but the value of the base moon product, like cadmium here, is going up, it should come out. Like if cadmium goes up, we should be seeing that in phenolic composites. We should be seeing things like dysprosium in hypersynaptic fibers, I want to say, and ferrogel. Those should be spiking up with this hot spike. Again, going opposite from my gut here, because I don't know who is clamping down supply here. Neodymium also remains very high. This should be coming out in nanotransistors, and I don't remember what else neodymium goes into. So I sort of see the market going both ways, going opposite directions. So we see hot spikes in the raw materials and dumps in the final products. And who wants to produce when they're going to lose money doing that? So we'll see in the next couple of weeks. In the PI markets, I don't have any to show, but we're starting to see some weakness in the P4s, but we're seeing a ton of strength in the P2s. Almost all of them flagged for high prices in the last week. So if you are in the business of low-end PI reactions, it'd be a great chance to get to market and sell them off. Also, if you are in the business of high-end PI reactions, you might be seeing these spikes ripple up through the markets, but I expect that to take a couple extra weeks. Also, mechanical parts have been doing extremely well, and I thought I had coolant, but I don't. So, moving on to ships, we have the Lachesis has been rather popular over the last week. I expect the price to crash back down to the level it was before, because I expect producers to overproduce now that it shows so favorably. So if you're willing to wait a couple of days on buying Lachesis, it'd be a good opportunity. And it seems popular enough that it might be worth speculating a few holes on, waiting for another one of these hot spikes when supply and demand start to get out of sync. The Drake Navy issue, which I pointed out last week, has been turning around, which says to me that we might be seeing the end of the Caldari Navy faction warfare cash-out period. So if you were buying Caldari Navy goods, things like shield extenders and shield boosters and ballistic controls and cruise missile launchers and Drake Navy issues and hook bills, those kind of things, we should be rising up over the next week or so, and it'd be a good chance to start washing those out. It should be a pretty it should you should be able to make a pretty penny over the next few weeks or months. Another interesting one, and I wouldn't have highlighted it if it didn't drive the prices so weirdly, is the Fenrir. It's the Minmatar jump freighter. We've seen some weakness over the last few weeks as it tracks material cost, but then it looks like there was an unfortunate buyout, a couple of unfortunate buyouts, skewing the average price low, and I don't know if traders then used that as a signal to say that the price is continuing to go down or what was going on. It's interesting. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but it looks like we're on the route to recovery. So if you had a Fenrir in the oven or you were bringing one to market, I would wait until the end of the weekend to try and sell it. Oh, no, that's not the jump freighter. It's the regular freighter. My bad. I'm sorry. Actually, no. Now that it's the regular freighter, at 1.3, I expect it to cap out and then continue tracking titanium and pyrite. So that's the actual prediction, not the previous one. So sorry for whoever bought out these really low values, but looks like we're up to 1.3 and then we should continue falling after that very slowly. Also, on the T3 front, it looks like the Loki and the Proteus have finally bottomed out. I still think the prices are overly low, but I don't have any data to back that up. It'd be a great chance to buy a Loki if you were in the market for one, and it might be a decent opportunity to speculate if you wanted to hold on to them for a couple of weeks to see if some metas might change. It's a dangerous bet, but I don't think the price will go much lower. Also, the Kestrel, as our final ship in the analysis, had bottomed out over the last week and is climbing back up. Again, this should track the price of minerals pretty strongly. And so I find it rather weird that we're seeing such wide rises and falls over the last couple of weeks. I expect the price to come back up and settle around 600K is probably the number I would point to. Moving on to modules, another interesting one that was doing some extremely weird behavior is medium remote shield booster 2s. These look like looks like somebody's buying them out and manipulating the market. There are some very long max and min tails that actually got chopped off by the graphing profile, and I'm not sure what to make of it yet. I expect it to come back down, but I don't know if it's going to fall all the way back down to steady state. I don't know who is driving the prices up this high. It's kind of weird to see such a high spike with such low volumes over the last few weeks. Also, in a similar vein, we saw a lot of shield equipment spike up. Like there was this huge buyout or something that we're seeing it here on the extra large ancillary shield boosters. We saw it also on crystal implants, which help shield boost amount. I don't know who is doing some weird meta thing, but there's some very strange signals coming out through the market. Another interesting one is that if you've got if you've got Minmatar Faction Warfare LP, or frankly Minmatar LP at all, it'd be a good chance to go cash some of that out for Republic Fleet EMP Large. It's been on a hot streak up, and I expect it to have a slow decay down. The sold volumes are kind of low at the moment, so it'd be a good chance to go and sneak up on that particular piece of the market. And also, it's a large enough market to absorb a lot of action. So if you've got a bunch of money, this actually might not be a terrible idea. On the shiny equipment front, we saw that Gistium, C-type, adaptive invulnerability fields, which have been on a long dump with all of the armor and shield mods that have been coming out of class 1 through 3 wormholes. We're starting to see some turnaround in the momentum. So I expect the prices to go up across the board. I'm not really sure where they'll land. I'm not sure how fast they'll go there, but we should see some growth over the next couple of weeks. As we see a correction back to the I want to say it's the 2 billion level. It's either 200 million or 2 billion. I don't know which. Also in the shiny realm, high-grade snakes are extremely cheap this weekend. I expect there to be a rush to go buy out some more. The Sviv pool has a micro warp drive bonus, so I still expect it to be a popular kiting ship, especially with the addendums to small projectile weapons. It's not getting a lot of good press, unfortunately, so I don't know if the Sviv pool is going to be as popular as the Confessor once we actually hit the market. It's still kind of a butt to fit, and projectiles still have some tracking problems, so it could go either way. If you wanted to put together a kit of snakes to sell, this would be a great chance to go pick up a couple of the implants cheap and wait to resell them maybe in a week or so. Another interesting one that's been dumping pretty hard has been the Caldari Navy Warfare Mind Link for remote boosting. Again, we saw a lot of heat over the last week in demand. This might be linked to the that high shield demand for the last week, but and it looks like somebody sold out the market, and we're seeing a settling back down to back down below the current level it was at. So if you wanted to go buy them, they're cheaper than normal. But I don't expect to speculate on them because not a lot of them sell over the course of a week. Another interesting one that got all chopped up by the new graphing profile is Emergent Combat Intelligence. I'm not sure what this goes into, but a good amount of them sell every week, and the prices are very high. I wish I could tell you more about the direction they were going, but that's where we are. And then last on the list, it's a great opportunity to go adopt a Fedo or Fido. They are extremely cheap. I don't know if drop rates changed or if somebody is just trading weirdly. They're extremely cheap, so give a Fido a home today and keep your slaves in line. Last part of the show is we're going to go into a prediction review. I only have a couple this week. Last week I had talked about the R16 and R32s should have been bubbling up into things like phenolic composites. As you can see, they're not, and this has me a little dismayed. I still expect the prices to come up, but I don't know when it's going to happen. I'm going to stick to my guns on this, but again, we're kind of in a weird territory where there isn't enough demand to really slurp up all of the supply, but it's not really, none of the pieces are all coordinating with each other. And then I also had brought up the Widow last week, expecting the prices to climb as a very temporary low price. It looks like the production oversupply was larger than I expected. And it's still a great chance to buy a Widow if you wanted one. With that, I'm going to close the show as I have in the last few weeks with my CSM ticket. I wholeheartedly endorse all of the candidates here. If you haven't heard the interviews yet, Sugar Kyle, Steve Rnukin, and Jane Fillins are all out on Cap Stable already. Ashtarothi should be released in the next week, I believe. These are all I wholeheartedly support all of these candidates. If you are a market or industry person, Sugar Kyle is a great resource for faction warfare and low-sec topics. She's also a low-sec trader, and she's very much into keeping up a fresh new hub. So she's a great resource, and I can't say enough nice things about her. Steve Vernuken has been is an amazing resource for the third-party dev community. He's also extremely into the POS and industry and market stuff as well. He's going to be a great representative as we go into the next CSM with the fingers on POS, Corp, and SOV changes, because they all have to get changed together. And I trust Steve to represent the POS part, and also to help fight for the API feeds we need to make those to leverage the new features we get. Ashtarothi, who, if you listen to the Hydrostatic podcast, is the host there. He's also on Hydrag. He's running on a very exploration and scouting and lore and a lot of the sort of side pieces that help that have to do with the little pieces that make the game work. He's also going to be, I think he's a great candidate, and he has a long way to climb against a very, very hot candidate pool this year. And then Jane Fillon, if you haven't heard of him, he ran last year, didn't make it, but he is representing the NPSI community. So if you work with friends outside of your corp and you want extra corp sort of like structures and means to help enable things like miniature communities and other things in game, he's really the guy to go to. Especially, I like to endorse him because from Faction Warfare, even though we sort of have kind of an alliance, it's mostly out of game and improper, so we have to do a lot of hacking around the mechanics to cooperate. So I'm hoping that if he could get in, that we'd see some love on the Faction Warfare side to better coordinate and have maybe slightly fewer civil wars. With that, I'm going to wrap up tonight's show. It's been great having all of you in the stream tonight. If you want to get in touch with me, the best places to do so are on Twitter at HlibIndustry, on the new Tweetfleet Slack, which I will post a link to in the YouTube and in the channel. It should be aderonrobotics.com/Tweetfleet to get registered. I'm hanging out in the Prosper channel there, talking about the show. You can also catch this show after it airs live on YouTube at youtube.com/EveProsper. And as always, it is live on Fridays at 0300 in-game time every week, barring anything outrageous. And you can watch live at twitch.tv/HlibIndustry. Holy cow, I can do this. Thanks again to everyone who tuned in. This has been a great show.